When the crystal chandelier fell towards the two children, he instinctively lunged to shield his white moonlight son. Watching helplessly as the chandelier smashed towards our daughter, after I desperately shielded our daughter and got my bones fractured, my daughter touched my face and said, "Mommy, let's go to a place without Daddy." Boom! A thunderous roar like a beast's howl tore through the glamorous elegance of the Hamptons' midsummer night. That was the sound of metal snapping, followed by the terrifying wind pressure from a heavy object plummeting down. The massive, antique crystal chandelier above my head, specially airlifted from Europe for tonight's charity gala, broke free from its cables without any warning, crashing down toward the center of the hall with a force that threatened to destroy everything. In that instant, time seemed to have been put on slow motion. My high heels felt rooted to the ground, and fear gripped my heart like an icy cold hand. My gaze instinctively turned to the man just 3 meters away from me. Dylan Thorne, my husband, the man who once vowed at our wedding to protect me with his life. At this very moment he was standing there, still holding a glass of champagne, and between him and me sat 2 children. One was our biological daughter, 5-year-old Haley. The other was the son of his first love, Sierra, 6-year-old Ryan. Both children were within the shadow of the falling chandelier. Dylan. I screamed my heart out, but before the sound could even leave my throat, I saw a scene that froze my blood for the rest of my life. Dylan moved. He didn't hesitate for a moment, didn't even let his gaze linger on Haley for even a 1/10 of a second. His body was like a fully drawn bow, lunging toward Ryan with a swiftness and determination I had never seen before. He grabbed the boy in one swift motion, rolled on the ground, and used his broad back to form an impenetrable wall for a child that wasn't even his. And my Haley, like a startled fawn, stared blankly at her father's retreating figure, those big purple grape-like eyes reflecting the ever-growing shadow of crystal. No? Maternal instinct instantly overwhelmed all reason and fear. Like a madwoman, I threw myself forward with all my strength. At that critical moment, I pressed Haley's small body tightly beneath me, using my back to face the disaster falling from above. Bang! The massive impact slammed hard into my right shoulder and back. I heard the sound of bones shattering, crisp, piercing like dry branches being snapped underfoot. Immediately after came the sound of countless crystal shards exploding outward, like dense raindrops, slicing through the dress on my back, piercing into my skin. Excruciating pain. It was an excruciating pain that could make one's soul leave their body, but I didn't dare move, didn't even dare breathe loudly. I clenched my teeth tightly, using my intact left hand to protect the back of Haley's head, hiding her entire body in my arms without a single gap. The deathly silence in the hall lasted for 3 seconds, then erupted into terrified screams. "Oh my God, call an ambulance, call 911 now, and is there a doctor? Someone's hurt here." The commotion surged like a tidal wave, but all I could hear was a ringing in my ears. I struggled to lift my head, my vision blurred from the pain, but I still looked at Haley first. The little one in my arms was completely unharmed, but her usually rosy little face was now as white as paper, her lips slightly purple, gasping violently. It was stress-induced asthma. "Haley, don't be scared, Mommy's here." I endured the excruciating pain that nearly made me pass out, trembling as I tried to reach for her medicine. But my right arm had no feeling at all, hanging limply at my side, a sign of a comminuted fracture. "Dylan, the medicine. Haley's medicine." I called out weakly, trying to find that man. Not far away, at the edge of the debris, Dylan was half kneeling on the ground, holding Ryan tightly in his arms. The boy had only scraped some skin, but was crying at the top of his lungs, loud enough to blow the roof off. "It's okay, Ryan, it's okay. Uncle is here." Dylan's voice was gentler than I had ever heard, trembling with the relief of surviving a disaster. He anxiously examined Ryan's arm as if it were the most precious porcelain in the world. Sierra rushed over at this moment too, wearing a plain white long dress, throwing herself into Dylan's arms with tears streaming down her face like a pear blossom in the rain. The family of three embraced tightly, a deeply touching scene. "You scared me to death, Dylan. If anything happened to Ryan, I couldn't go on living," she cried out. "Don't be afraid. I'm here. No one can hurt you." Dylan gently patted her back, his eyes full of heartache. At that moment, I felt all the blood in my body turn ice cold. The wound on my back was still bleeding, but the hole in my heart was 10,000 times deeper than that wound. This was the man I had loved for 5 years. This was the father who had promised to love Haley more than anything. At the moment between life and death, his instinct betrayed his truest heart. As if finally sensing the strange looks from those around him, Dylan finally turned his head and looked this way. When he saw Haley, whom I was shielding beneath me, trembling all over, and me, covered in blood and utterly disheveled, a flash of astonishment crossed his eyes, followed by a barely perceptible hint of embarrassment and irritation. He stood up, but didn't rush over immediately. Instead, he first comforted Sierra, who was still fake crying, before striding over to me. "How did it get this serious?" He frowned, looking down at me condescendingly. There was no concern in his tone, only a hint of blame. "Why didn't you watch the child? It was so chaotic just now. Didn't you know to take Haley somewhere safe?" I looked at this man in disbelief. The intense pain made cold sweat soak through my bangs. I stared at him fixedly, my voice hoarse as if scraped over sandpaper. "Dylan, Haley's having an asthma attack. In my handbag. The medicine." He froze for a moment, as if only now realizing something was wrong with Haley. He frantically searched through the handbag on the ground, pulled out the inhaler, and handed it to me. I took it with my trembling left hand and administered the medication to Haley. Only when the small body in my arms stopped convulsing violently and her breathing gradually steadied did I collapse limply on the ground as if all my strength had been drained. "Elena, your hand." He seemed to finally notice my twisted right arm and my back stained red with blood, reaching out to help me up. "Don't touch me." I turned sideways to avoid his hand. It wasn't playing hard to get, it wasn't throwing a tantrum, but a visceral disgust. Just then, the ambulance sirens grew from distant to near. Several paramedics rushed in and lifted me and Ryan onto separate stretchers. "Family! Who's the family?" a paramedic shouted. Dylan stood between the two stretchers, his gaze shifting between me and Ryan. Sierra let out another well-timed cry. "Ryan, does your head feel dizzy? Is it a concussion? Oh my God, doctor!" Ryan immediately played along, closing his eyes and whimpering about the pain. Dylan's gaze instantly turned resolute. He turned to look at me, speaking rapidly. "Elena, you're an adult. You can take care of yourself. Ryan is still young, and Sierra will be scared alone. I need to stay with them. My assistant will be here any minute. He'll accompany you to the hospital." After saying that, he didn't even wait for my response, turned around and rushed onto the first ambulance following the stretcher carrying Ryan. The door slammed shut with a bang, cutting off my entire view. I lay on the cold stretcher, looking at the brilliant starry sky of the Hamptons, feeling nothing but utter irony. This was my marriage. This was the love I once took pride in. Haley beside me gripped my uninjured left hand tightly. She didn't cry, just kept her big eyes wide open, staring fixedly at the ambulance carrying her father away. In those eyes, there was a deadness that didn't belong to a 5-year-old. "Mommy," she called me softly, her voice light as a feather. "I'm here. Does Daddy not want us anymore?" This single sentence was like a rusty, dull knife, sawing back and forth across my heart. I took a deep breath, held back the stinging in my eyes, and gripped her small hand with all my strength. "Haley, remember, I looked into her eyes and said, enunciating each word, "From today on, we don't need him anymore." The ambulance sped into the night with its sirens wailing. I knew my arm was broken, but I also knew that some things, though shattered, finally let me see reality for what it was. Dylan Thorne, since you've made your choice, don't ever think about turning back. The emergency room at New York Presbyterian Hospital was always filled with the smell of disinfectant and hushed whispers. My right arm had just been wrapped in a heavy cast, hanging in front of my chest like a clumsy white cocoon. The painkillers were starting to wear off, and the dull ache in my bones was eroding my nerves, wave after wave like the tide. I sat on the bench in the hallway with the still silent Haley beside me. She was pressed close against me, clutching the now empty inhaler in her hand. "Mommy, does it hurt?" She looked up. Those eyes that should have been filled with childlike innocence were now as calm and cold as a late autumn lake. "It doesn't hurt, sweetie." I gently stroked her soft golden brown curls with my left hand, a trait inherited from Dylan. Just then, a burst of cheerful laughter came from the end of the hallway. That laughter was too grating, completely out of place in the lifeless emergency area. I instinctively looked up, my gaze passing through several half-open glass doors, landing on that VIP observation room. It was bright inside, with warm, cozy yellow lighting. Dylan was sitting by the hospital bed holding an ice cream cone in his hand, patiently feeding it to Ryan on the bed. "Eat slower. No one's going to take it from you." Even through the glass, I could imagine that dripping tenderness in his voice. Ryan had a Band-Aid on his forehead that was his only injury. He was taking big bites of ice cream while smugly swinging his legs. Where was any trace of a concussion? Sierra sat to the side, thoughtfully wiping the beads of sweat from Dylan's forehead with a tissue. The scene of the three of them smiling at each other was so harmonious, like a perfect oil painting. That was a real family of three, while Haley and I were like stains that had wandered into this painting, redundant and awkward. Haley saw it too. Her little hand suddenly tightened, her nails even digging into my palm. But she didn't cry, didn't even let out a single question. She took out her sketchbook and crayons from her little backpack, lowered her head, and started scribbling hard. That was the coping method she learned from her therapist. Ever since Dylan first stood her up for her birthday party for Sierra and her son 2 years ago, she had become more and more silent. Drawing had become her only outlet. I watched the lines she drew. It was a black painting, a black house, black trees, and a man in a black suit, walking away from a little girl with his back turned to her. And at the very bottom of the drawing, with her childish strokes, she had scrawled a crooked line of English. "A world without Daddy." This line of words completely shattered the last bit of hope in my heart. I was wrong. For these 5 years, I always thought that as long as I was tolerant enough, patient enough, Dylan would one day turn around and see us. I thought that to give Haley a complete family, I could swallow all my grievances, but I forgot that a complete family filled with lies and emotional abuse hurts more than a broken one. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dylan. "Elena, Ryan still needs to be observed overnight. I've already sent the driver to pick you up. Take Haley home first. Don't throw a tantrum. I'll have finance transfer the medical bills to you." Don't throw a tantrum. Medical bills. Looking at these words, I laughed instead of getting angry. 5 years of marriage, in his eyes, was probably just a transaction that could be dismissed with money. My broken arm, Haley's asthma, none of it mattered as much as a Band-Aid for that illegitimate child. Daniel. I dialed a number that had been sitting in my contacts for a long time, but had never been called. It was New York's top divorce lawyer, Daniel Kim. He was my college senior and one of the few friends I could trust in this city. The phone was answered after just one ring. "Elena, it's so late. Is something urgent?" A clear and steady male voice came from the other end, carrying a hint of barely noticeable concern. "Daniel." I took a deep breath. Even though my voice was trembling from the pain, my tone was unprecedentedly resolute. I want a divorce. The other end of the phone fell silent for a moment, then came the sound of papers flipping and a clearer response. "Where are you? I'm coming over now." Half an hour later, Daniel appeared at the emergency room entrance in a dark gray tailored suit. He glanced at my arm in a sling, and in those eyes that were usually calm and sharp, a terrifying coldness flashed for an instant. But he didn't ask anything, just walked over quickly, took off his coat, and gently draped it over my shoulders. At that moment, the chill of being abandoned by Dylan in the cold wind was finally dispelled a little. "I've already drafted the agreement." He took out a document from his briefcase, his voice low and powerful. "According to your request, you waive the property division, but you must obtain full custody of Haley. Based on my understanding of Dylan, as long as you don't take his money, that child is just a burden to him. He'll sign it." I took the document, looking at the dense clauses on it. That was my ticket to freedom. "Thank you, Daniel." "Don't thank me." He looked at me, his gaze profound. "Alina, you deserve better. Now go end this nightmare." I stood up, holding Haley's hand with my left hand, documents in my right, and accompanied by Daniel, walked step by step toward that VIP ward filled with laughter. With every step, my wound ached, but my heart grew lighter and lighter. The moment I pushed open the door, the laughter in the room came to an abrupt halt. Dylan was feeding the last spoonful of ice cream into Ryan's mouth. When he saw me, the smile on his face instantly froze, then turned into impatience. "Elena, didn't I tell you to go home first? Why are you still here?" He stood up with a frown, even instinctively shielding Sierra and her son behind him, as if I were some kind of monster. "Haley needs rest. Why are you dragging her around? You're getting more and more senseless." That was his first reaction. No concern, no guilt, only blame. Sierra hid behind him, showing a timid expression. "Elena, please don't blame Dylan. It's all because Ryan's health is poor." "Shut up!" I coldly spat out those two words. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a deterrence I'd never had before. Sierra froze, seemingly not expecting the usually meek me to have such an aura. I let go of Haley's hand and gestured for Daniel to take her outside the door. Some filthy scenes don't need to dirty a child's eyes. Then I walked up to Dylan and with my intact left hand, slammed the divorce papers hard against his chest. A crisp slap rang out, exceptionally clear in the quiet hospital room. "Dylan Thorne, we're getting divorced." Dylan was stunned. He lowered his head to look at the documents scattered on the floor, the large divorce on the cover stinging his eyes. "Are you crazy?" He jerked his head up, his eyes filled with disbelief and absurdity. "Just because of this little thing tonight? Elena, stop being so unreasonable. I just comforted a frightened child, and you're threatening me with divorce?" "Little thing?" I pointed at my broken arm, my smile bleak. "My arm is broken. Haley nearly went into shock from an asthma attack, and in your eyes, this doesn't compare to your bastard's scraped skin?" Hearing the words, "bastard," Dylan's expression shifted, and Sierra's face turned deathly pale. "Don't spout nonsense." He was somewhat flustered and angry. "Ryan is innocent. And I sent my assistant to look after you. What more do you want?" "I don't want anything." I looked at him calmly, as if looking at a stranger. "Sign it. I'll leave with nothing. I just want Haley." Dylan stared at me intently, seemingly trying to find even a trace of joking on my face, but he failed. The determination in my eyes made him feel an inexplicable sense of panic, but he was also a man so proud he was arrogant. In his eyes, I, the housewife who couldn't survive without him, had no right to bring up divorce. "Good, very good." He laughed in fury, picked up the pen from the ground, and signed his name with quick strokes. "Elena, you asked for this. Don't think you can still live that life of luxury after leaving the Thorne family. Don't come crying to me begging to remarry." He was certain I would regret it. He was certain I couldn't live without him. Looking at that flamboyant signature, I only found it utterly laughable. Don't worry, that day will never come. I put away the documents, turned around, and left without a trace of reluctance. At the doorway, I stopped, with my back to him, and left my final words. Dylan, enjoy guarding your true love and son. I hope when you discover the truth one day, you can still be as tough as you are today. With that, I pushed the door open and walked out. Outside the door, Daniel was squatting on the ground playing origami with Haley. Seeing me come out, he stood up and reached out his hand to me. Let's go, I'll take you to the airport. The airport? I've already booked the tickets to Milan. It's the fashion capital and also where your dreams began. Daniel smiled with a depth in that smile I had never understood before. Elena, go shine, and let those who look down on you know exactly what they missed. I looked at him, then at Haley beside me. Haley lifted her head and for the first time gave me a faint yet genuine smile. Mommy, are we going somewhere without him? Yes, sweetheart. I bent down and kissed her forehead. We're going to start a new life. That night, a torrential rain poured down on New York, but I knew my dawn was about to come. 2 years later, in September's Manhattan, there was already a hint of coolness in the air. But inside this private gallery in the Gallery District, the temperature was off the charts. Countless camera flashes flickered, champagne towers refracting mesmerizing lights and shadows. New York's elite fashion editors, even Hollywood stars, they had all gathered here just to catch a glimpse of tonight's star, the mysterious jewelry designer who had returned triumphantly from Milan, Elena Marlowe. I heard she made a name for herself at Milan Design Week. Even the editor-in-chief of Vogue couldn't stop praising her. Her designs are so unique. That concept of shattered and rebirth just strikes right at the soul. I stood backstage, peering through the heavy velvet curtain at the bustling crowd outside. 2 years, 730 days and nights. I was no longer that pathetic housewife who only knew how to cry in the emergency room. I was wearing my self-designed Nirvana series haute couture gown. It was a flame totem pieced together from countless tiny rubies, burning all the way from the hem to my chest, like a phoenix reborn from the flames. My once broken right arm had long since healed, and although it left a faint scar, I didn't hide it. Instead, I turned it into a unique piece of art with an exquisite gold thread tattoo. Ready? A familiar voice came from behind. Daniel, dressed in a well-tailored dark blue suit, walked over holding a glass of warm water. For the past 2 years, he had been practically my only support in Milan. He was my legal advisor, my business partner, and more importantly, Haley's most trusted Uncle Daniel. I took the water and had a sip, flashing him a confident smile. Never been better. Then go. He gently patted my shoulder, his eyes full of pride. Tonight, you're the queen. The curtain opened. The moment I stepped onto the runway, the entire venue fell silent instantly, followed by thunderous applause. I stood under the spotlight, basking in this glory that belonged to me. Just then, a commotion broke out in the crowd. Several bodyguards in black suits rudely shoved aside the guests on both sides, forcefully clearing a path. A man walked out. He was wearing that expensive handmade custom suit from 2 years ago. Though still handsome, the corners of his eyes and brows now carried a hint of fatigue and hostility that was hard to conceal. Dylan Thorne. He actually came. He was holding a large bouquet of vibrant red roses, which looked tacky and out of place in the minimalist black, white, and gray art exhibition hall. When he saw me on the stage, a flash of amazement crossed his eyes, quickly turning into wild joy and a possessive certainty that I was already his. "Elena!" He shouted my name loudly, completely disregarding the occasion, even trying to rush directly onto the stage. "I knew you would come back. You came back for me, didn't you?" The whole room erupted in commotion. The reporters' cameras instantly aimed at him. "Is that the CEO of Thorne Group?" I heard he's the designer's ex-husband? Oh my God, is this going to be a reconciliation drama? I stood on the high platform looking down at him from above, watching him act like a clown, thinking that as long as he crooked his finger, I would still be that Elena who came at his beck and call. He rushed to the edge of the runway, trying to hand me the bouquet. "Nia, Elena, these are your favorite red roses. I know you're still mad at me. These 2 years have been hard for me too. Come back. I've already renovated the house, all in the style you like. Just say yes, and we'll remarry tomorrow." His voice was loud, full of confidence. In his view, I held this exhibition for no other reason than to attract his attention, to prove to him that I was capable enough to be worthy of him. Truly incurable arrogance. I didn't take the flowers. I just tilted my head slightly and spoke into the microphone in a voice the entire room could hear, cold and clear. "Security." 2 burly security guards immediately stepped forward and blocked Dylan. Dylan froze, the roses in his hand almost falling to the ground. "Elena, what do you mean by this? I'm Dylan. I'm your husband," he shouted in embarrassed rage. "Ex-husband," I corrected, my tone devoid of any emotion. "Besides, Mr. Thorne, this is a private exhibition. No entry without an invitation. Please have some self-respect. Dylan's face turned the color of pig liver. He probably never imagined that one day he would be publicly expelled by me. "Stop pretending." He pointed at the dress I was wearing, flustered and exasperated. "Isn't this dress you're wearing to commemorate our wedding? This red, isn't it the color of the toasting dress from our wedding? You clearly still have me in your heart." Hearing this, a few low snickers came from the audience below. I looked at him as if looking at an uncivilized savage. "Mr. Thorne, perhaps you need to take some fashion classes." I casually flicked my skirt. This is the signature piece of my Phoenix series, inspired by rebirth after destruction. As for the red, I paused, my gaze becoming sharp as a blade. "That's the color of blood, the blood I bled dry that night in Hampton 2 years ago." Dylan's body jolted violently, as if he had been punched hard, his face turning deathly pale in an instant. What happened 2 years ago was undoubtedly a thorn in his heart. No matter how much he deceived himself, he couldn't erase the truth of that night. The murmuring around grew louder, and quite a few people started pointing at him. Just then, Daniel walked onto the stage, naturally standing beside me in a protective stance, blocking Dylan's aggressive gaze. "Mr. Thorne." Daniel pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses, his tone gentle yet concealing a sharp edge. "According to the divorce agreement my client signed with you, you have no right to interfere with her normal work and life. If you continue to harass her, I don't mind applying for a restraining order from the court." Dylan stared fixedly at Daniel, the jealous fire in his eyes nearly bursting forth. "Who are you? This is between us as husband and wife. It's not your place to interfere." "I am Miss Elena's fiancé." The moment Daniel said this, the whole room erupted again. Even I turned to look at him with some surprise, but he just winked at me, his warm hands gently holding my slightly cold fingertips. At that moment, I didn't refute. I let him hold my hand, feeling the warmth from his palm. That was the strength supporting me to stand here. Dylan completely broke down. "Fiancé? Impossible. Elena only loves me." He tried to break through the security guards like a madman. "Elena, say something. Tell him. You're mine." "Take him away." I waved my hand impatiently. The security guard stopped being polite, grabbing Dylan and dragging him out. In full view of everyone, he was thrown out the door like a stray dog, that expensive bouquet of red roses trampled to mush, just like his pathetic pride. The banquet continued. No one mentioned that little episode again. In this arena of fame and fortune, losers don't deserve sympathy. After the dinner ended, Daniel drove me home. The car stopped downstairs of my apartment building. I unfastened my seatbelt and looked at him. "Just now, thank you for helping me out of that situation." "It wasn't just to help you out." Daniel turned his head, and in the dim light of the car, his gaze was so serious it made my heart skip a beat. "Elena, what I said was true. I'm waiting for you. Always have been." I froze. "No need to rush to answer me," he smiled, reaching out to tuck the stray hair by my ear. "I know you need time, but I want you to know, whenever it is, as long as you look back, I'll be right here." My heart felt like it was gently bumped by something, aching and swelling. I didn't say anything, just gave him a grateful smile, then pushed the door open and got out of the car. Pushing open the front door, warm light greeted me. 7-year-old Haley was lying on the carpet drawing. Hearing the noise, she immediately dropped her brush and flew into my arms like a happy little bird. "Mommy, you're back, baby." I picked her up and gave her a big kiss on the face. "Where's Uncle Daniel?" She peeked out the door. "Uncle went home." "Oh." Haley pouted with some disappointment. "I wanted to show him my new drawing." I smiled and ruffled her hair, my gaze falling on that piece of drawing paper. In the drawing, it was still that house with the big garden, still with the bright sun. But this time, in the daddy spot that had always been empty, there was now a tall figure wearing a dark blue suit and glasses. It was Daniel. Looking at that drawing, my eyes grew a little moist. Perhaps some wounds had truly been filled by love. Just then, my phone started vibrating frantically. It was an unfamiliar local number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. On the other end of the phone was an unfamiliar female voice, choked with sobs, with the chaotic sounds of sirens and the beeping of machines in the background. "Is this Mr. Thorne's ex-wife? This is Mount Sinai Hospital Emergency Center. Mr. Dylan Thorne just collapsed here because his son, Ryan Miller, was in a serious car accident." My hand holding the phone tightened slightly. Finally, it's here. That castle built on lies is finally about to crumble. "I am," I replied calmly, "but I'm not a doctor. I can't help." "No, ma'am, the situation is special." There was a hint of anxiety and something strange in the nurse's voice. "The patient is bleeding heavily and urgently needs a transfusion. But Mr. Thorne's blood type doesn't match the child's, and what? And according to preliminary tests, from a genetic standpoint, Mr. Thorne absolutely cannot be this child's father." I held my phone, looking at the dazzling New York nightscape outside the window, a cold curve slowly forming at the corner of my lips. I had waited for this moment for 2 whole years. "Got it," I said indifferently. "Tell Mr. Thorne if he doesn't mind, I can come visit. After all, I also want to see with my own eyes how this little drama is going to end." The corridors of Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency room were filled with a more suffocating pressure than that night 2 years ago. When I stepped out of the elevator in my high heels, the first thing I saw was Dylan slumped on the bench outside the operating room. He looked even more disheveled than at the exhibition. That expensive custom suit was all wrinkled, his tie pulled loose and hanging crooked to one side, dotted with specks of blood. He clutched his head with both hands, his whole being like a crumbling sculpture. And in the corner across from him, Sierra was curled up into a ball, trembling. Her makeup was completely ruined, her usually refined facade torn to shreds by fear, her eyes darting around, not daring to look at Dylan at all. "Elena." Hearing the footsteps, Dylan suddenly lifted his head. When he saw me, a nearly manic light instantly burst forth in his bloodshot eyes, the look of a drowning man spotting a piece of driftwood. "You came. I knew you still cared about me." He stumbled toward me, trying to grab my hand. "Elena, the doctors are talking nonsense. They must have made a mistake. How could Ryan not be my child? Sierra told me herself. It was—" I stepped back, coldly avoiding his touch. Daniel stepped in front of me at just the right moment, like an insurmountable wall. "Mr. Thorne, please compose yourself." Daniel's voice wasn't loud, but it carried an unquestionable authority. Just then, the emergency room door opened. The attending doctor came out holding a report, brows tightly furrowed, his expression so serious it made people's hearts race. "Who is the patient's family?" "I am! I'm his father!" Dylan practically roared as he rushed to the doctor, grabbing the doctor's white coat. "How's my son? Why haven't you given him a blood transfusion yet? I pay so much money to support you people, and you can't even handle this little thing." The doctor frowned and pushed his hand away, his tone carrying a hint of professional coldness and helplessness. "Mr. Thorne, please calm down. We've already urgently requested blood from the blood bank, but because the patient has very rare Rh-negative type O blood, the stock is extremely limited, and we're still waiting for allocation." "What Rh-negative? What type O?" Dylan froze, his eyes blank. "I'm type AB, Sierra is type O. How could Ryan possibly be Rh-negative type O?" The doctor sighed, handed him the report, and said in an almost cruelly calm tone, "Mr. Thorne, this is exactly what we need to confirm with you. According to basic genetic laws, a father with type AB blood and a mother with type O blood can only have children with type A or type B. Absolutely, absolutely impossible to have a child with type O blood. Unless—" The doctor pushed up his glasses, casting a meaningful glance at Sierra in the corner. "Unless an extremely rare genetic mutation occurred, with a probability of about 1 in 10 million. Or, from a biological standpoint, you are not this child's father." Boom! It was as if a bolt of lightning had split open Dylan's chaotic mind. He held that thin report, his hands shaking like he had Parkinson's. He recognized every single letter on it, but strung together, they became incomprehensible gibberish. Type A, B, type O, not a match. No, impossible. He muttered to himself, suddenly whipping around and staring dead at Sierra. "Sierra, what the hell is going on? Say something." Sierra's face had already gone deathly pale with fear. She dropped to her knees with a thud, crying her heart out. "Dylan, let me explain. The hospital made a mistake. It has to be their mistake. Ryan looks so much like you. How could he possibly not be your child?" "Like me?" Dylan let out a shrill, cold laugh. He strode over and grabbed Sierra's chin, forcing her to look up. "How does he look like me? For the past 6 years, every time I took him for a checkup, you made up excuses to keep me from seeing the reports. Every time I wanted to do a paternity test for household registration, you cried and said I didn't trust you, that you'd take the child and kill yourself. I'm such a fool. I actually believed your bullshit." Dylan's hand was trembling, gripping so hard he nearly crushed Sierra's jawbone. "Talk! Whose bastard is that kid?" Sierra screamed in pain, tears and snot smeared all over her face. I'll talk. It was that bartender's from back then. But I really didn't know. I always thought he was yours. Dylan, I'm begging you, for the sake of all these years we've been together, please save Ryan. He's just a child." "Bartender?" Dylan seemed like he had heard some enormous joke. He let go of his hands and staggered back a few steps until his back hit the cold wall. For a bartender's son. He abandoned the wife who had been through thick and thin with him. He neglected his biological daughter who adored him with all her heart. When the earthquake struck, he pushed his own flesh and blood into danger with his own hands, yet shielded that bastard child beneath him. Ha 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 ha! Dylan suddenly burst into laughter, shrill and desperate, echoing through the empty corridor, sending chills down one's spine. As he laughed and laughed, tears began streaming down his face. He turned his head and looked at me, who'd been watching coldly from the sidelines. In that moment, the light in his eyes was completely extinguished, leaving only endless despair and deathly silence. "Elena." His voice was impossibly hoarse. "You knew all along, didn't you?" I looked at him without a ripple of emotion in my heart. 2 years ago, on the day I signed the divorce papers, I warned you. I said calmly, I hope that when you discover the truth someday, you can still act as tough as you did that day. Unfortunately, you were too confident. You never believed I would leave you, nor did you believe Sierra would deceive you. Your arrogance blinded you. You yourself destroyed all of this with your own hands. Dylan painfully closed his eyes, 2 streams of tears sliding down his cheeks. He suddenly remembered many things. He remembered when Haley was just born, holding that soft little bundle, swearing to give her the best love in the world. He remembered on Haley's 3rd birthday, because of one phone call from Sierra saying Ryan had a fever, he left behind a room full of guests and a crying Haley. He remembered that night 2 years ago, Haley trembling in Elena's arms, still asking, "Does Daddy not want me anymore?" At that moment, regret coiled around his heart like a venomous snake, making him wish he were dead. Just then, the emergency room door opened again. The nurse rushed out anxiously. "Blood bank emergency. The Rh negative O-type blood will still take time to procure. The patient's blood pressure is still dropping. If we don't transfuse immediately, I'm afraid." "Take mine." A cold, clear voice rang out. Everyone turned their heads in surprise. The one who spoke was actually Sierra. She got up from the ground, wiped away her tears, her face showing an almost manic determination. "I'm type O blood. Although it's not panda blood, in emergencies a small amount can be substituted. Take mine. Give him all my blood. As long as it can save my son, I'm willing to do anything." This is a mother's final instinct. Even if she's a liar, a vain and greedy woman, in this moment, her love for her child is real. In contrast, Dylan's so-called fatherly love over these 6 years seems so ironic and laughable. The nurse looked at the doctor with some difficulty, and the doctor nodded. "Might as well try anything at this point. Draw 400 cubic centimeters for emergency first." Sierra followed the nurse inside. Only Daniel and I were left in the corridor, along with Dylan, who seemed to have had his soul drained away. "Let's go," I said to Daniel. This show, watching up to here, is enough. The ending was already predetermined. Watching any further would only add to the disgust. "Elena!" Just as I turned around, Dylan suddenly dropped to his knees on the ground with a thud. This time, he really knelt down. His knees slammed heavily onto the marble floor, making a dull sound. "Please, don't go." He shuffled forward on his knees a few steps, reaching out to grab the hem of my skirt, but was kicked away by Daniel. But he didn't care. He lay on the ground like a dog, looking up at me with his face covered in tears. "I know I was wrong. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just let me see Haley one more time, even just once. I want to say sorry to her. I want to tell her that Daddy actually loves her." "Love?" I stopped in my tracks, looking down at him from above, my gaze colder than the winter night's bitter wind. "Dylan, you don't deserve to say that word. You know what? Haley knew long ago that you didn't love her. Every time you abandoned her for that bastard child, every time she watched you hold someone else's kid and shower them with care, she already knew. The reason she never called you out was because she didn't want to upset me. She's more sensible than you, kinder than you, and understands what love is far better than you ever will. Now, she's doing great. She has a mom who loves her, an uncle who treats her like his own daughter. She doesn't need you anymore." After I finished speaking, I took Daniel's arm and walked toward the elevator without looking back. Behind me came Dylan's desperate screams and sobs, but I didn't look back. The elevator doors slowly closed, shutting out that man's voice and shutting out the nightmare of the first half of my life. In that moment, I felt lighter than I ever had before. Walking out of the hospital entrance, it was raining outside. Fine rain fell on the streets of New York, washing away the dust of this city. Daniel opened a black umbrella, sheltering me completely beneath it. "Cold?" he asked softly. "Not cold." I shook my head, looking at the gentle lines of his profile. "With you here, not cold at all." He smiled, reaching out to wrap his arm around my shoulders, leading me into the curtain of rain. "Let's go. Let's head home. Haley is still waiting for us to tell her a bedtime story. Okay, let's go home." If the revelation of the truth was a nuclear explosion, then the days that followed were a long period of nuclear fallout for Dylan. Although Ryan was resuscitated due to prolonged oxygen deprivation to his brain, he was left with severe after effects, and his intelligence might forever remain at the level of a 3 or 4-year-old. Sierra fainted on the operating table from excessive blood loss, and when she woke up, she faced not only a seriously ill son, but also an impending prison sentence. Dylan sued her for fraud. This high society scandal became the talk of New York's upper class for an entire month. The once high and mighty Dylan Thorne became a laughingstock in everyone's eyes. He sent Sierra to prison, sent Ryan to a welfare home, and then, like a madman, locked himself in the house that once belonged to us. He started calling me like crazy, sending messages, even showing up downstairs at my company to corner me. But I didn't see him even once, until that day when I received a call from Haley's school teacher in my office. "Ms. Marlowe, could you come to the school?" "Haley's father." "He's at the school gate. He's a bit agitated, and the security can't hold him back." My heart suddenly sank. He actually dared to harass Haley. I grabbed my car keys and rushed to the school like crazy. Daniel was in a meeting, but I couldn't care less. When I rushed to the entrance of that private elementary school in the Upper East Side, I saw Dylan being pinned to the ground by 2 security guards. His once crisp suit was now covered in dust, his hair disheveled, and that face that once captivated countless women was now stubbly and haggard, like a homeless man. And Haley was being shielded behind the teacher, her little face filled with terror. "Haley, it's Daddy! Don't you recognize Daddy?" Dylan struggled to lift his head, his eyes frantic and desperate. "Daddy bought you your favorite Barbie doll. Look! It's even the limited edition one." He was clutching tightly onto a crushed and deformed Barbie doll gift box, the gift that 2 years ago Haley had cried and begged him to buy, but he had casually brushed off to take Ryan to the amusement park instead. What was the point of buying it now? "Stop!" I rushed over, pushed the security guards aside, and swept Haley into my arms. Feeling the little body in my embrace trembling violently, my rage instantly burned away all reason. "Dylan, have you gone crazy enough?" I pointed at his nose and yelled, "This is a school! If you dare scare Haley again, I'll call the police and have you rot in prison." Seeing me, the frenzy in Dylan's eyes faded slightly, replaced by deep pleading. "Eileen, I just want to see the child. I really just want to see her." He scrambled up from the ground, trying to get closer, but was pushed back by the disgust in my eyes. "I know I wronged Haley before. I want to make it up to her. I have money. I have a lot of money. I can give Haley the best education. She doesn't need it!" I coldly cut him off. "Your money. Save it to buy yourself a coffin." "Haley, tell him. Do you need his money? Do you need this father?" I let go of Haley, crouched down, and looked straight into her eyes. I knew this was cruel to her, but some tumors have to be ripped out by the roots before new flesh can grow. Haley looked at that pathetic man, that figure who had appeared in her dreams countless times, making her both yearn for him and fear him. She took a deep breath, and a maturity and resolve beyond her years appeared on her small face. She took a step forward, didn't flinch, looked straight into Dylan's eyes, and said clearly, "Mister, I don't know you." Boom dash dash. That single word, Mister, was even more vicious than that slap from before, hitting Dylan right in his soul. He completely froze, and the Barbie doll in his hands dropped to the ground with a clatter. "Haley, what did you call me?" "I'm Daddy. I'm your daddy." His voice was trembling, tears instantly flooding out. "How can you not recognize your dad? Did Mommy teach you that? It wasn't Mommy who taught me." Haley shook her head, her eyes so calm it was heartbreaking. "You taught me yourself. You said that Ryan was your real child. You said I was disobedient, that you didn't like me. You said you were going to send me away. I remember all of it. I used to really want you to hold me, but you never even looked at me. Now I have Uncle Goo. He draws with me, tells me stories, and takes me horseback riding. He's my real daddy, Haley said, then turned and threw herself into my arms, never looking at him again. Mommy, let's go home. I want to eat the pasta Uncle Goo makes. Okay, let's go home. I picked up Haley and turned to walk toward the car. Behind me came Dylan's heart-wrenching sobs. On the street, under the gaze of countless parents and children, he wailed like an abandoned child. Haley, Daddy was wrong. Daddy was really wrong. Please forgive Daddy. But no one looked back. This time, even the wind didn't stop for him. Back home, Daniel had already made dinner. Seeing Haley's slightly red and swollen eyes, he didn't ask anything, just gave her a big hug, then like a magic trick, pulled out a pen from behind his back. Look, what's this? The newest markers with 108 colors. Haley's eyes instantly lit up, all the gloom swept away. Watching them laughing and playing around in the living room, I leaned against the doorframe, feeling that the void in my heart was finally completely filled. In the following months, Dylan completely disappeared, but I knew he was still watching us. Sometimes when coming home from work, I would feel someone following behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing. Sometimes a bouquet of flowers or some expensive children's toys would mysteriously appear at the front door, and I threw them all straight into the trash. Until that day, I received a court summons. Dylan was suing for a custody modification. He hired the most expensive legal team in New York, claiming that although my financial situation had improved, as a single mother, I couldn't provide the child with complete fatherly love and the best environment for growth. He was willing to put up 10% of the Thorn Group's shares as a trust fund for Haley, as long as he could get custody back. 10% of the shares. That was an astronomical figure of billions of dollars. He was declaring war on me with money. On the day of the hearing, heavy snow fell in New York. I wore a black professional suit and walked into the courtroom on Daniel's arm. Dylan sat at the plaintiff's seat, having lost a lot of weight, his eye sockets sunken, looking sinister and crazed. When he saw Daniel beside me, his gaze looked like he wanted to devour someone. The trial was intense. Dylan's lawyer was aggressive, listing countless so-called evidence, trying to prove that I was unfit to raise a child. Your Honor, although. My client has made some mistakes in the past. He has deeply reflected on them. He is the child's biological father and has substantial financial resources to provide the best material conditions for the child. While the defendant now has a job as a designer, she often has to work overtime and travel on business and simply doesn't have enough time to accompany the child. Moreover, the lawyer glanced at Daniel with contempt. The defendant is currently cohabiting with an unmarried man, which is also a potential destabilizing factor for the child's growth environment. I was shaking all over with anger. Daniel patted the back of my hand reassuringly, stood up, adjusted his collar, and walked toward the judge's bench unhurriedly. Your Honor, regarding the plaintiff's lawyer's accusations, I only have a few points to state. He took out a thick document, his voice clear and powerful. First, regarding companionship. This is a complete record of all the time my client, Miss Elena, has spent with the children over the past 2 years, including every parent-teacher conference, every outdoor activity, every weekend. As for the plaintiff, he took out a photo. It was a scene from the emergency room 2 years ago, where Dylan was feeding Ryan ice cream while Haley was drawing in the corner. At the moment when his child's life was in danger, what was he as a father doing? Is this his so-called fatherly love? Dylan's face instantly turned deathly pale. Second, regarding financial capability. My client is not only a renowned designer, but also one of the partners of Brilliant Star. Her income is sufficient to provide the child with a comfortable life. As for those billions in trust funds, Daniel sneered and pulled out a piece of paper from the documents. "This is the financial report of Thorn Group for the past 6 months. Due to poor decisions and the impact of scandals, the group's stock price has already dropped by half, facing a serious debt crisis. The so-called billions are nothing but empty promises." Finally, regarding cohabitation without marriage, Daniel turned around, looked at me with tender eyes, then took out a red velvet box from his pocket. In front of everyone's eyes, in the solemn courtroom, he got down on one knee. "Miss Elena Marlowe, will you marry me? Let me rightfully become Haley's father and take care of you both for the rest of our lives?" The whole courtroom was in an uproar. The judge even forgot to bang his gavel. Dylan abruptly stood up, his eyes bloodshot. "Daniel, how dare you?" I looked at Daniel, at that diamond ring sparkling with brilliant light, and tears burst from my eyes. This time, they were tears of happiness. "I do." I extended my hand, letting him slip that ring, representing his promise, onto my ring finger. Thunderous applause erupted in the courtroom. Dylan slumped back into his chair, his face ashen. Without any suspense, the judge announced the verdict on the spot, rejecting Dylan's claims, upholding the original ruling, and Haley would remain under my sole custody. Furthermore, given the psychological trauma Dylan had previously caused to the child, the judge also issued an even stricter restraining order. Without permission, Dylan was not allowed to come within 100 meters of Haley, or he would face detention. Walking out of the courthouse doors, the snow had stopped. The long absent sunlight pierced through the clouds, spilling onto the pristine white snow. Dylan stood at the bottom of the steps, watching the backs of our family of 3 embracing as we left. At that moment, he finally understood that some things, once lost, are lost forever. No matter what he did, no matter how much money he had, the door to happiness had been completely closed to him, and I, holding Haley's hand, arm in arm with Daniel, walked toward our new life. But I knew this wasn't the end. For someone like Dylan, the real punishment had only just begun. Time, like the changing seasons in Central Park, quietly yet steadily moved forward. 3 more years had passed since that absurd courtroom farce. In these 3 years, my life seemed to have hit the accelerator. Aaron and I held a small wedding in Provence, without the media's cameras and microphones, only our closest family and friends. Haley wore a little flower girl dress I designed myself, smiling brighter than the sunshine that day. Under my leadership, Brilliant Star successfully opened up the North American market. The Rebirth series I designed not only won the International Jewelry Design Award that year, but also became a symbol of strength and courage in the hearts of countless women. I finally became the person I once envied the most. As for news about Dylan Thorn, it was like a wind that occasionally drifted past my ears, growing thinner and more desolate. I heard that under his stubborn management, Thorn Group ultimately couldn't survive the debt crisis and was maliciously acquired by competitors. The once mighty Wall Street tycoon became penniless overnight, even burdened with massive debts. I heard he was disowned by his family. Those relatives and friends who once fawned over him now couldn't stay far enough away from him. I also heard that he became a heavy alcoholic, often seen dead drunk on the streets late at night, still calling out my name and Haley's. As for all this, I just listened and let it go. My heart no longer stirred. Until that rainy night in late autumn. That day was Haley's 10th birthday. Our family of 3 had just returned from celebrating at Disneyland. The car was driving along Fifth Avenue, the windshield wipers tirelessly sweeping the glass, making rhythmic sounds. Haley was tired from playing and fell asleep leaning on Aaron's shoulder, still tightly hugging that huge Mickey plush in her arms. Aaron steadily supported her with one hand while gently holding my hand with the other, warm jazz music flowing through the car. "Look, who's that?" Aaron suddenly said softly, gesturing for me to look outside the window. I followed his gaze. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of a high-end restaurant, a ragged homeless man was curled up under the eaves to shelter from the rain. In front of him sat a dirty paper cup with only a few scattered coins inside. The rain had soaked his matted, long hair and beard. He shivered, staring with hollow eyes at the well-dressed people inside the restaurant, enjoying their fine food. It was Dylan. Even though he had become like this, I still recognized him at a glance. The man who used to throw a tantrum even if his cufflinks were slightly crooked, the man who wouldn't eat anything less than Michelin 3-star, was now begging in the cold wind like a stray dog. And inside the restaurant, there happened to be several of his former business partners sitting there. They chatted and laughed freely, occasionally glancing outside with looks full of disdain and mockery, yet not one of them was willing to spare him even a piece of bread. "Want me to stop the car?" Aaron asked me, his tone containing no sympathy, only inquiry. I watched that figure, my heart filled with mixed emotions, not heartache, not satisfaction, but an indescribable desolation. Life is like a play, and nothing exemplifies this more. No need. I withdrew my gaze, gently shaking my head. "Let's go." Just then, Dylan seemed to sense something. He suddenly raised his head, his gaze piercing through the heavy curtain of rain, meeting my eyes directly. What kind of eyes were those? Clouded, desperate, regretful, ashamed. All emotions intertwined together, finally turning into a pool of stagnant water. He saw me sitting in the luxury car, warm and elegant. He also saw the man beside me who showered me with endless love, and the daughter sleeping soundly and sweetly. His lips moved, as if wanting to call my name, but in the end couldn't make a single sound. He lowered his head, looking at his filthy hands that once signed billion-dollar contracts, hands that once heartlessly pushed away his wife and daughter. Now these hands held nothing but emptiness. The light turned green. The car slowly started, leaving that figure far behind. I glanced one last time through the rearview mirror. I saw that man in the pouring rain slowly and heavily fall to his knees. He buried his head deep between his arms, letting the cold rain wash over his long, rotten soul. "What's wrong?" Haley woke up groggily, rubbing her eyes. "It's okay, baby." I turned around, helped tuck the blanket around her, and pressed a kiss on her forehead. "Go back to sleep. We're almost home." Haley nuzzled against Aaron's shoulder, then drifted back into deep sleep. Aaron held my hand tightly, the warmth from his palm passing through, dispelling the chill that had surged into my heart in that instant. "It's all in the past now," he said. "Yeah, it's all over." I looked at the road ahead, illuminated by the headlights, a relieved smile tugging at the corners of my lips. The rain had stopped. A sliver of faint light appeared at the horizon. It was the first light before dawn. The new life belonging to me, Haley, and Aaron was only just beginning. And as for Dylan Thorne's story, after this heavy rain, it finally came to a complete and utter end. He would spend the rest of his life chewing on that belated, useless regret, one powerful enough to consume him whole. This was the cruelest, yet also the most just ending for him.